Good morning. We're going to get started with an invocation by the Reverend Barrie Henke of Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman James Greiner.
Almighty and everlasting God, we come to you on this new morning, and we're reminded that your mercies come fresh and new to us every morning, for great is your faithfulness. And we pray, dear Lord, that your mercies will be upon this council as they meet together this day. Be with them in all of their deliberations, all of their discussions, whether over the mundane or whether it be over the controversial. And let them feel the guidance of your Holy Spirit in all that they do. We ask you to give to them a passion for their people and the welfare of their people. Give to them a servant's attitude that they might remember that they have been chosen twofold by their constituents and also by you, as you chose Queen Esther for such a time as this. There are many things before them this day and in the days ahead. They have accomplished much by your blessing, and we pray that you will continue to lead them forward to accomplish much more for the common good of this diverse community. Give to them a spirit of humbleness. Give to them a heart bent on the good of their people. Give to them also boldness in action as they consider the many ways in which they can serve their community, and in serving their community, also serve you. You have given each one of them a special, unique skill set, talents, and knowledge to be used to the building up of this wonderful community. And we ask, dear Lord, that as you work with them, that this city might continue to grow and to flourish and be blessed by their work and by your presence and guidance. Give to them boldness in all that they do as they serve you. For you are the everlasting God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order, and we have a couple items up front that I will handle from the podium below. Bart, you want to come up here? See who that belongs to. All right. Bart Schott is our City Employee of the Month, pending consideration of this resolution. And we would like to know a little bit more about you, Bart. So I would ask the clerk to read this resolution.
Whereas Bart Schott has been a city employee for 18 years and is the director of the Human Resource Information Systems Division of the Personnel Department. Whereas Bart is an innovative individual who is always looking for ways to provide better service to city departments, and he is always responsive to the needs of other city employees. Whereas Bart has developed numerous automated methods for accessing services from the Personnel Department using SharePoint workflows. Bart has created forms allowing departments to generate requests and automatically have them routed to the proper individual for approval in the Personnel and Finance Department, as well as the City Manager's office, making it easier for review and tracking. Whereas Bart worked with the IT department last year to develop a more efficient method to ensure employees are paid from the correct source. Bart developed this new method to replace the previous manual process, which often resulted in employees being paid from incorrect funds and having to correct the error. Whereas Bart is an exceptional customer service-oriented city employee who is always looking to improve efficiency. Whereas this council desires to recognize Bart Schott for his dedication, professionalism, and commitment to the residents of the city of Oklahoma City. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the city of Oklahoma City that they hereby thank and commend Bart, September 2019, South Oklahoma City Kiwanis Club Employee of the Month.
Well, this is a billion-dollar enterprise with 4,800 employees, and to provide the service level to our citizens that they expect, we've got to have all kinds of intricacies and innovative people doing all the important things that make it all work. And so we have the best city employees in the country, and you are certainly a great example of that, Bart. Thank you so much for all that you do, and I enjoyed learning more about you. Now, before you say a few words, because I don't want you to screw this up, I think this is going to go well for you. I think we should quit when we're ahead. Let's go ahead and take the vote. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. You are the Employee of the Month, Bart. Now, though, we would love to hear a few words from you, Bart. And I understood from our photo earlier it may just be a few, but but here you go.
It will be just a few, and just want to pass on my appreciation and thanks for the recognition. It's been a great place to work, good 18 years, and I look forward to a few more.
Great. Thank you, Bart. We appreciate you. This is yours to keep. Let's hear it one more time for Bart. All right. Why don't we get our regional food bank folks up here? Yeah, everybody from the photo, come on up here. You've come all this way. All right, well, this is another resolution, this one for Hunger Action Month, and let's hear a little bit more about that from the clerk.
Whereas hunger and poverty are issues of vital concern in Oklahoma, where 15% of people face hunger daily and 1 in every 4 children do not know where their next meal will come from. Whereas the City of Oklahoma City is committed to taking steps to combat hunger in every part of our community and to provide additional resources in Oklahoma City. The City of Oklahoma City is committed to working with the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, a member of the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks, in educating people about the role and importance of food banks in addressing hunger and raising awareness of the need to devote more resources and attention to hunger issues. Whereas the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma is playing an integral role in addressing access to nutritious foods for residents of Northeast Oklahoma City and other portions of the community where food insecurity rates are high. Whereas the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma distributed nearly 52 million pounds of food last year through its network of food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, schools, and other community organizations in central and western Oklahoma. Whereas the month of September has been designated Hunger Action Month in order to bring attention to food insecurity in Oklahoma City and throughout the state, and to engage the public to take action to end hunger, one helping at a time. Whereas food banks across the country, including the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, will host numerous events throughout the month of September to bring awareness and attention to helping end hunger in their local community. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby thank and commend the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma for the nourishment and hope they provide to those in need. And the Mayor does hereby proclaim September 2019 as Hunger Action Month in Oklahoma City.
Thank you so much for all that the Regional Food Bank does, and this is just, I know that you do this 12 months out of the year, not just in September. I know, John, you were going to maybe say a few words. Would you like to introduce yourself and who you've got up here?
Thank you. My name is John Bob Semple. I serve as Senior Director for Community Impact at the Food Bank. This is Arthur Younger. He's our Community Connections Manager for northern part of the metro area, and our Chief Executive Officer, Katie Fitzgerald. Hunger Action Month is an opportunity for us to see our neighbors, to see the issue of hunger as something that we can all contribute to. These are our neighbors. Councilwoman Nice has been championing the needs of our neighbors and friends in Northeast Oklahoma City. We know that is something that needs attention, but this month is an opportunity for us all to see that we can play a role. not only supporting the food bank, but supporting food pantries and feeding programs throughout our entire city to make sure that as our city progresses, none of our neighbors are left behind. And so thank you so much to the council, mayor, and Councilwoman Nice for continuing that work every single day.
Great, great. Now this is, this is a resolution. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything or make a motion.
I'll say a few words. I want to thank the Regional Food Bank for all that you all do. When we asked you, could you help, you did not hesitate. And I thank you. And obviously, Katie's a dear friend from my leadership, OKC, Class 35, best class ever, just so everyone knows. That was definitely the best class. And to John, Bob, and Arthur, thank you all. And to all of the employees that help to alleviate and meet the needs for Oklahomans and regionally. Because I don't think a lot of people realize that we serve not just Oklahoma with our regional food bank, but we serve other states that surround us as well. So that's something that we should be very proud of, that people can call outside of Oklahoma and say, can you help? And we can meet that need. So I appreciate all that you do, and thank you for continuously helping for our communities within Oklahoma City, our schools, the backpack program, everything that you do to provide to make sure that our tummies are fed and our babies are not going hungry. So we appreciate that, especially with our health task force, meeting the need for health. And thank you to Ms. Debbie for helping. As soon as we said we wanted to do something, she went to work. So we appreciate you for your effort in making sure this happened for today. Thank you, Ms. Debbie. Appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, if there's nothing else, I'd like to move that we approve this resolution.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you, guys. Thank you. This is yours to keep. All right, I'll make my way back to my chair and we'll continue the rest of the business. All right, that concludes the items from the Office of the Mayor. We now proceed to item 4, Journal of Council Proceedings. We have 2 items we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 5, request for uncontested continuances. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. On page 22, item 9H1, we're going to strike all the items that I'll list here. Item F, 6320 South Phillips Avenue, the owner is secured. Item L, 3023 Northwest 19th Street, the owner is secured. And item Q, 1228 Northwest 105th Street, the owner is secured. Under item 9I1, abandoned buildings, item D, page 23, item D, 6320 South Phillips Avenue, the owner is secured. Item I, 3023 Northwest 19th Street, the owner is secured. And item L, 1228 Northwest 105th Street, the owner has secured. That's all the items that I have.
Okay. Now we'll proceed to item 6, revocable permits. Item 6A1 is a revocable permit with the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust and Friends of Multisport to hold the 2019 Redman Triathlon and Half Triathlon on September 21st. And don't seem to have anyone who signed up to speak. Is there anyone who came anyways? Okay. Well, this is in wards 1, 2, and 8, so. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 6A2, this is also relating to the Red Man, so if you guys just want to jump in. Okay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 6B is a revocable permit with the 45th Infantry Brigade Combat Team Fallen Heroes Half Marathon for the 2019 Fallen Heroes Half Marathon on September 28th. And we do have someone who has signed up to speak, George Cares or Caves? Caves. Welcome, George. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address.
George Caves, 16402 East Reno Avenue, Choctaw, Oklahoma.
And just tell us a little bit about your event.
So this is our 9th annual half marathon that we've ran. It supports the families of the fallen that we've had in the 45th IBCT, as well as Oklahoma Army National Guard. It's a scholarship foundation for the spouses and children of those soldiers. So every year we put it on. Last year we gave $3,600 in scholarships, as well as we give $1,900 in gift cards for the back-to-school things. Help the kids out, help the spouses, family members that are still going to school. So it's a great cause. Hope everybody would come out and participate.
Great, thank you. This is in wards 3, 4, and 6. So anybody who wants to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for this event. Thank you for what you guys do. So with that, I would move it for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. That brings us to item C, revocable permit with the Mesta Park Neighborhood Association for the Mesta Festa on September 22nd. And do we have anyone sign to speak? We do. Jennifer Bowman.
My name is Jennifer Bowman, 704 Northwest 18th Street, Oklahoma City, 73103. This is the 24th anniversary or year of Mesta Festa. It is a community block party that has grown over time. It is very important to our community and to our park. Since 2001, we have been able to raise and provide $150,000 worth of funds to go back into our community park. We look forward to this event every year, and we hope that you'll all join us.
Great. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yeah, it's a great event, and I look forward to seeing you there, and I'll move for approval.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 6D is a revocable permit with Scissortail Community Development for the 2019 Fiestas Patrias, September 13th through the 16th. We haven't had anyone sign up to speak. So 4, 6, and 7, you want to jump in here, Councilman Stone?
Yeah, absolutely. I know this has been a fantastic event in the past, so I'd certainly move for approval.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 6E is a revocable permit with the Vietnamese American Community of OKC and Metro Area, aka Quang Don, Vietnam, for the 2019 Lunar Moon Festival. And I believe we have Michael has signed up to speak. Why don't you come forward, Mr. Chairman, and introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Good morning, Mayor and Councilmen, City Manager, and everyone. My name is Michael Doe. I'm the President of the Vietnamese American Community. You probably see me the last 2 years. This is going to be our 3rd year that we have Lunar Moon Festival at Military Park. Thanks to the improvement to the park, we have so many activities that we can do at the park in the Asian District. And we do appreciate everything that you help us and make it happen. This year, we're going to have a third year Lunar Moon Festival. It's going to have lion dance, a little Miss Vietnam pageant, food truck, food vendors, and many activities throughout the day from 5 to 10 p.m. We would like to invite everybody, the mayor, the councilman, everybody, please come join us for that celebration. The first year we had 2,000 people. The second year we have 5,000. So this year we're hoping to bring more business to the Asian District and make it become one of the top attractions in Oklahoma City. So thanks everybody for making it possible.
Thank you, Michael. Councilman Cooper.
I just want to say thank you for bringing us a 3rd year of this event. I've attended in the past. I would definitely encourage everyone to join us over in Ward 2. I don't know if anyone else thinks about this the way I do, but the beautiful median that heads onto Classen from 23rd Street, announcing the Asian District, it just feels like a gateway into Ward 2 for me. It just really does. And so whatever you all can keep doing to honor all the different cultures that make up the Asian District, you have my full support, and with that, I'd move approval.
One thing I'd like to add is we want to grow this to be a multi-different, not just Vietnamese. We will bring Laotian, Indian, India, Japanese, Chinese, Korea. It's for everybody, so thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, I have to recuse from item 6F, so I turn the chair over to Vice Mayor McAtee.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jamie Tompkins, you'd come forward, give us your name and address and something about your event.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Tompkins, 421 Northwest 10th, Oklahoma City. This is our second annual Midtown Oktoberfest. It's a block party style, and we're going to have live music, food, plenty of German beer, and a portion of our proceeds we donated to the Oklahoma Humane Society.
Thank you, ma'am. We need a motion in a second.
Yes, thank you for, this is a pretty popular event for the last few years,
Yes.
so I will motion for approval.
Thank you.
We have a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. And it's approved unanimously. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, brings us to item 6G, revocable right-of-way use permit with Red Coyote Running and Fitness to hold the Red Coyote Runtoberfest 5K. And anyone here to speak on that? Yeah, please come forward. Just state your name and address.
Brett Hale, 2412 Brookside Avenue, Edmond, Oklahoma, 73034. I'm with Adventure Tech Sports, and I'm representing the Red Coyote Running and Fitness Runtoberfest 5K. We're partnering with Fassler Hall. This is the fourth year we've done the event, and it's a 5K plus a post-run party. Will take place on October 20th, starting at 4 o'clock. The run will be done by 6 o'clock. Streets will be back open. Starts and finishes on Park Place at Fassler Hall. And a portion of the proceeds will benefit Girls on the Run, which is a program that provides funds for girls to join and participate in various running programs and help build their health, confidence, and self-esteem. So I hope you guys can come out and join us, and I appreciate your time and consideration today.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hammond?
Yeah, that sounds like a great cause. I move for approval.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the revocable permits. We'll now recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through F we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through D we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCPPA and convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, where we have two items we could take with one motion. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust and reconvene as the council, where we find ourselves at the bottom of page 5, item 7, the consent docket. And just for purposes of efficiency, I might start out with I have to recuse from items 7I, 1, and 2. And so why don't we might submit to your consideration that you handle those first. And so I'll step out and turn the chair over to Vice Mayor McAtee.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're talking about 7I, 1, and 2. Can we take it with one motion? Look for a motion in a second. Motion in a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it's so done.
All right.
I'd move the remaining items subject to individual consideration.
Okay. Got a motion and a second on the remaining items, subject to individual consideration. So I know we have a presentation on item G and on AH. Is there anything else that anyone wants to pull out or discuss?
Yes, on G, I'd like to have a separate vote for that. Or
Did you say G?
Yes.
A separate vote, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Guys are easy this morning. Well, we will take them in order then. We'll start with item G, which is a presentation.
Yeah, so Christy Yeager is going to give us a presentation on this program and the outreach and the purposes for the city being involved in trying to reach out for the census.
Good morning. The census is coming up. Census Day is March 12th. It's earlier than normal, and we are wanting to make an effort to reach out to everybody in the community and try to encourage them to take the census. One thing that we want to do to help our office is hire a PR firm or marketing firms to reach out to individuals that are hard to reach for us. The census identified those individuals as people who are non-English speakers, and for us, it's people who speak Spanish. Neighborhoods with historic low response rates. And if you look at the census map, those areas are predominantly in South Oklahoma City, South 15th to South 36th, between Portland and Shields. We're going to look at those areas, but then there are other areas throughout the city, like the area around northwest 122nd and Penn, where a lot of apartments are, very low response rates in those areas. People who live in apartments will look at concentrating on those areas. Households with children under 5 typically do not report their children, so we want to encourage people to do that. And then people who are unemployed are also hard to encourage to count. So we feel like if we get firms out there in the community to talk to people, then we'll have a better response rate. And oftentimes people who don't respond are underserved by these federal funds, so we feel like it's important to get the word out. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, can you just speak a little bit to the impact of the census on city funding?
Sure. Federal funding, it's mostly federal funding, but the impact is on Medicaid, SNAP, Medicare Part B, ODOT, WIC, Head Start. One of the biggest things for Oklahoma City school children is the National School Lunch Program. And so those are the things that really impacts health and well-being of our residents. Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that item for that separate vote at some point. Let's go ahead then and move on. I want to mention on item 7X, there was an amendment that was timely in its distribution that changes the address from 15740 to 15720 and the ward from 8 to 7. Finally, we have a presentation on item 8H.
Yeah, Doug Dowler, our budget director, is just going to give a presentation on this resolution that will set the public hearing for a budget amendment.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The budget amendment presented this morning is primarily administrative in nature. The first item in the amendment is what we call purchase order rollover, PO rollover. These are things that were ordered or encumbered in the prior year but not received before the end of the year, so we're paying for them in the current year. So what's happened is we reserved the money in prior year budget, but we're paying for it out of this year's budget. So last year's fund balance was a little higher than it would have been because we didn't pay for these. We're budgeting that in the current year so it doesn't use up departments' budgets. And so this affected 12 funds. This current year is about $4.8 million in PO rollover. Again, it's primarily administrative in nature. The second area is a rather minor change. We have a position in the planning department that works on a number of grants and has charged their time to those grants through the year. We have an audit recommendation for HUD that they would rather us have that position be general fund funded and then the grants reimbursed to general fund. So we're just making that change. They will still be 100% reimbursed. They're just located in the general fund, so we've just raised expenses and revenue in the general fund, that revenue coming from the grant. And then the final changes in the Capital Improvement Projects Fund. We have several transfers were made into the CIP fund after the budget was proposed and adopted in June. As a result of these transfers, fund balance was higher than expected in the CIP fund, and so we wanted to budget to be able to do some of these projects. For example, Parks and Recreation Department had sufficient savings in their general fund budget that they were able to transfer $1.4 million to the CIP fund to conduct the electrical repairs that are being done on the canal. We're doing that out of the CIP fund. There are other projects such as HVAC repairs and seat replacement at the Bricktown Ballpark. capital maintenance and upgrades at a number of city facilities. There's possible or potential support for the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation and several other projects that altogether total $10.4 million. So overall, the budget amendment adds $15.2 million to the budget, brings the FY20 budget to $1,569,793,722. And so the amendment's being introduced today. It will be advertised. We'll have a public hearing at the next City Council meeting, and then Council will vote on adoption of the amendment at that same September 24th meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
All right. Any questions or comments for Doug? Okay. Thank you, sir. Well, that concludes anything that anybody had said they wanted to talk about. So we have a motion on the table. We'll deem that motion to not include the item G, and obviously does not include item I previously voted on. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we will turn to item 7G, request for proposals to be advertised, marketing campaign for community outreach for the 2020 census.
I'll move the item.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right. We now find ourselves all the way on page 16 of your printed agenda, item 8, the concurrence docket. We have items A through H we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Brings us to item 9, items requiring separate votes. Item 9A, these are all ordinances on final hearing that were recommended for approval at the Planning Commission. 9A1, closing the east to west alley in Block 2 of the Packing House Park Edition, extending west from North Villa Avenue north of Northwest 2nd. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yeah, Francis, is anyone signed up to speak? Okay, well, this is pretty simple, alley closure, and I'll move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9A2, closing and vacating all the streets and alleys bounded by Northeast 6th, Stonewall, 4th, Kelly, etc. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9A3, closing a 5-foot utility easement between lots 25 and 26 in Block 1, etc. Councilman Griner.
Move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9A4, closing and vacating the east-west 20-foot alley in Block 11 of South Oklahoma City Addition, east of Broadway, south of the Boulevard. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9B1, this is a public hearing regarding updates to the building code. This was presented at our last meeting, and this is the public hearing in our 3-meeting cycle. So is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this public hearing regarding the updates to our building code? Seeing none, I'll move to item 9B2. This is the public hearing also relating to the building code. This is regarding specifically a resolution declaring the need for the adoption of the code. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, 9B3 is another public hearing regarding a resolution also related to this is specifically related to the residential code. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to 9C1. This is a public hearing regarding the fire code. This is the second of 3 meetings in our cycle, and so does anyone wish to speak under this public hearing regarding updates to the fire code? Seeing none, 9C2. This is a public hearing regarding a resolution declaring the need for adoption of the fire code. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll go to 9D. This is a public hearing regarding the ordinance that we discussed at the last meeting that was presented that will only be effective for a few hours on the opening date of Scissortail Park. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing regarding this proposed ordinance? Yeah, come forward. If you'd state your name and address and keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less.
Hi, I'm Landon Witt. This is my first time doing this. I live at 3200 West Britton Road, Unit 78. I just wanted to just kind of say that when I first saw the proposal, I actually run a small YouTube channel, and I was going to video some stuff at the park. And then I was informed that that would probably be outlawed due to the ordinance that you guys had proposed to limit cameras at the park. I did a little bit of research, and I may be wrong on this because I'm kind of learning how this works, but we've not done that very often. In fact, there's only been 2 times before, one during the red light cameras, which was unanimously voted, and 2 during Timothy McVeigh's court hearing on the trial of the Murray building bombing. So this would be the 3rd time we've ever prevented the press from having cameras in the public domain, and it would be for the interest of performing artists. So I just ask that we kind of look at this a little bit slower and decide in light of the First Amendment of the United States, and that's all I have to say.
So,
I can speak to this.
Okay.
If I may.
We also, we got Christy Yeager from the Public Information Office.
Right. So I'm working with the band's promoter on Scissor Till Park's opening, the Kings of Leon, and the Kings of Leon have a requirement that they only allow, we're trying to work this out with the band, but I think it's going to be the first 3 songs to be filmed by crews. So the band is allowing us to allow the media in for the first 3 songs, and then they cannot record anymore. And then that's not unusual.
Right, but any individual can, of course, use their phone all concert long. You're talking about sophisticated camera equipment.
It's point 19.
Mr. Witt wants to bring 6 cameras in.
Professional cameras, SLRs, video cameras, iPads, or GoPros.
Right, right. So I mean, when you say the First Amendment, I want to be clear that anybody can tape the concert on their phone all night long. You know, you're talking about really more equipment than you are about the First Amendment. And so you want to bring in certain cameras that I guess are not typically allowed in a concert setting.
News type camera. That's correct.
Yeah, he wants to bring 6 cameras
Yeah,
in.
no, well, I don't have to bring 6 cameras. I simply requested it. And I also requested the contract between the city and Kings of Leon, which I still haven't gotten because it's not between the city. Right, it's between a private organization.
But he could potentially, if you want to go to different podiums, it's a little, you guys are very.
There we go. Thank you.
So you could potentially get a media credential and do exactly what you want to do for the first 3 songs, potentially.
Correct. Well, we don't have space for 6 cameras if that's what he wants, but we will have limited space, and he can bring a camera in, maybe 2.
Okay. You know, this was constructed as a venue for, the Great Lawn specifically, was constructed as a venue for these types of concerts. We're excited that we get the opportunity at this first night to demonstrate its potential. It is in that context, when it is used in that way, it is like the Chesapeake Arena, or it is like any other sort of concert venue. We have secured sponsors so that people don't have to pay to be there that night and buy tickets, and that's a gift to the people of Oklahoma City. But when this park was designed, it was as if this would potentially be a concert venue with controlled access and all the rules that you have to deal with when you go to a concert. I guess it doesn't strike me as terribly unusual that there would be certain rules that we all are kind of used to at concerts, which is you can't bring in 6 cameras, and all that kind of stuff. And I know enough to know that I see the media come in for those first few songs and then they all leave. I mean, I've observed that as a concert goer. So anyways, I don't necessarily, my conscience is not shocked by these rules because they're just standard concert rules, and this is a concert. But I'm happy to hear.
I think the concern. I mean, I'm 100% behind Kings of Leon coming here. It's going to be the largest concert we've ever had in Oklahoma. It will literally be the Woodstock of Oklahoma. 30-something thousand people are expected. I think Chesapeake is 18,000. So that's double what we've ever had. I mean, this is an epic event for the city that could literally leverage us into national news. If done correctly, if they film this correctly, this could coverage on national news. I'm a realtor for a living who promotes things that go around in the city. I've gotten calls from people all over the world just this last year. It's really been an exciting year. So things like this, as long as they're being covered correctly, is great. That's one side of it. The other side is the verbiage in this proposal says an emergency for the well-being of the public. And we're limiting cameras in a public domain.
So an emergency clause in legislation, whether it be ordinance or state law, I've dealt with this for 9 years of being in elected office. It's just a standard verbiage, and it sounds really over the top for most things that it's applied to. So I wouldn't get caught up too much in those words. Those were not drafted specifically for this ordinance. That's just, it helps the ordinance take effect sooner, and it's standard verbiage that it does sound like we're being invaded by the Russians. I totally get that. But
Right. I just want to make sure that we kind of word it in a way to where this is not a repeated thing. Because if we were able to get this for Friday night Kings of Leon, why couldn't we get this for a construction site that's going on somewhere? Or why couldn't we get this for a public hearing going on somewhere over here? So I just want to make sure that the wording is very precise to make sure we're not in conflict with the public domain limiting the freedom of the press, right?
Sure.
Because that's what it looks like right now.
I think for those few hours, this becomes a concert venue, just like Chesapeake Arena does, where all these rules apply every time, and I don't see that. I mean, certainly feel free to be a watchdog on it. I just don't see this happening again unless we should choose to have another concert with a, type of performer who has all these guidelines that they bring to bear. That would be my, but if it should happen, it would all be voted on and discussed just like we are here. It won't happen in the cloak of darkness. It happens just like this. So this is why we have a public hearing to discuss it. So any comments, questions about any of this? Okay.
Nobody's got anything?
Well, I'll just say that I have similar concerns, but the issue is that it's not at this stage in this, and I think this is an issue with a lot of our technically public lands, is that they turn into private venues for these events. So they get to call the shots, essentially. And so, that's kind of where it stands, is that it's not, at that point, it's public land with some public money, but sponsors have paid for the concert. It's kind of a private facility at that point for those whatever number of hours. So that's, I feel a little bit like our hands get tied as the city because it turns into a private facility and privately operated, even though it is technically city. And that's just the way that we've set up most of our big parks and venues, unfortunately. So that's kind of my 2 cents, but it's frustrating.
Okay, there's no wording that we can add in there to help specify that, or should I could probably draft something, but would that delay? I don't want to delay. My purpose is not to delay this wonderful concert at all.
What is it? Tell me what it is you're hoping to change exactly.
What I'm hoping is to put a little bit faster restraint on when we vote for professional cameras to be limited in the public domain. I believe that the internet is going to be, Cisco says 80% video traffic, and already the millennials are 100% on YouTube, 100% on TikTok, on Instagram Live. And so this is a video world. And so if you want to limit what the kids are seeing, you limit video. And so that's why, to me, when I saw this, I was like, I have to get involved because video is our language.
Right. Again, anyone can videotape the concert. I expect 20,000 people to be videotaping the concert. So you're talking about equipment, that you would like to bring in.
Right.
So
it's his camera, DSLRs, and yes, I understand that an iPhone is an incredible tool, and it really is the best. It's just the cameras, DSLRs, GoPros, those are traditionally being used for mainstream media. So one could look and go, that's specifically worded to prevent professional video taking, which as long as you're making your video to disseminate information to the public, that's covered underneath the First Amendment.
So what is your change that you're seeking?
I think when we put the words emergency and then we put the words for the public well-being, and then we follow that with chained wallets and cameras.
So the emergency clause has to be in there so this takes effect in time for the concert.
Correct.
So that's not going to change, so.
Right, so
Is it possible, I'm sorry to interrupt you, is it possible for us to maybe just add the verbiage up to 3 with media credentials? Is that a possibility? I don't know.
Is it media addressed in the ordinance, or is that just kind of assumed? How does that work? Yeah, Amanda from Municipal Counselor's Office.
The media is not specifically addressed in the ordinance. They have a designated location after they've determined that they meet that criteria of being media personnel. And so that will be regulated as to that location only. This is applying to the public who's coming in as concert goers. So if you're looking to add a provision for a certain number of cameras for concert goers, then you would have that apply to all concert goers. So
Your comment was just about the media and the first 3 songs thing, right? Would you like to explore that, or we could have that for the next meeting probably, but.
I think we should see what we can do as far as to accommodate that for this effort. Because this is, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for quite a few people to experience this type of concert in this brand-new venue. So I think if we're able to possibly do that, and just speaking from, I guess, my media background, I feel you, so I understand.
I would only say that this was specifically asked for by the band, this restriction. So if we change what they asked for, there may not be a concert.
Well, you're not asking for this to affect the public. You're talking about the media aspect.
The media.
Yeah.
So since they already have a designation.
They've already agreed to that.
we can draft a provision that applies only to media and specifically address what the band will allow, and bring that back to council.
Okay. I know that's not exactly what
This
you're
is just a
looking
public
for.
hearing today. We have the final vote.
Right. Yeah, this isn't the vote.
Well, and that's it. I want to get with your representatives as well. That way I can help kind of draft something just to say how the YouTube and Instagram and Facebook Live community is going to kind of see this, and also that we can play a role and have some clearer guidelines. I think in the past it's always been for TV and newspapers, and that's not always the mainstream media anymore. So I think if we can have kind of some understanding of what role does YouTube and Instagram and Facebook Live play in the public domain in the future. So I know that's a whole different issue, but I saw this as like, oh my gosh, this could be a precedent, and it may not be. I don't know. It's my first time in this stuff, so.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this public hearing? Okay, we'll move on to item 9E. So this relates to, this is a public hearing regarding the ordinance relating to the sales tax for MAPS 4. There was multiple items. This was the one that required 3 meetings because it's an ordinance, and it's the ordinance that would take effect collecting the penny if the vote passed on December 10th. And so there's 3 meetings required for this. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing portion of the meeting regarding the MAPS 4 penny sales tax? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 9F. This is an ordinance to be introduced, set for public hearing on September 24th, potential final hearing on October 8th. This is the first of 3 meetings. We're going to have a presentation on it. This relates to our municipal code on intoxicating substances.
Yes, and Orville Jones is here from the Municipal Counselor's Office to speak on this item.
Thank you. These are 3 separate ordinances that arise from 3 separate departments: the Police Department, the Development Services Department, and the Parks and Recreation Department. The intent of these ordinances is simply to catch Oklahoma City up to the vocabulary and regulatory structure of the alcohol changes that the legislature made in 2016, 2017, 2018. So there's really nothing substantive here, but it is on for 3 separate hearings, and if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
And Orville, you're really speaking both to items F1, 2, and 3, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, yeah. Okay, any questions for Orville? Okay, we do need a motion. Can we take all 3 with one? F1, 2, and 3 to introduce the ordinances for consideration. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, now we are at, it's like public hearing day. All right, we're at 9G1. This is the public hearing regarding dilapidated structures here listed, items A through C. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on any of these dilapidated structures? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion for a resolution found at 9G2 declaring that the structures are dilapidated. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9H1, this is the public hearing regarding unsecured structures, items A through Q, although 3 of those were struck, F, L, and Q, at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on the unsecured structures here listed? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for the resolution found at 9H2 declaring that the structures are unsecured. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9I1 is a public hearing regarding abandoned buildings here listed, except for the one struck at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none? Got a motion for the resolution at 9I2 declaring that the buildings are abandoned. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We now find ourselves at 9J. This is a resolution approving the incurrence of indebtedness by the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. And I believe we have a presentation.
Yes, Brent Bryan, our finance director, is here to speak on this item. Jason Fairbrush is also here, our director of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. If there are questions related to the garage, Brent's going to speak to us about the authorization for incurrence of indebtedness for COTPA.
Good morning. This item went before the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority on Friday and was approved. What this item does, it helps with the development of 1,100 space parking garage adjacent to the new convention center, the Omni Hotel, the new Scissortail Park, and the Chesapeake Arena. This item authorizes the issuance of up to $15 million in new debt by the Parking Authority, or the Transportation and Parking Authority. It also approves an agreement of support. An agreement of support is typically provided by the city on deals like this, and it's the agreement of support essentially says if the revenues are insufficient, the city will provide the necessary funds to make the debt service payments. And that's a typical, that's the way we do these bond issues. It also waives competitive bidding. When we do bond issues, you can do them one of two ways. You can do them as competitive bidding, or you can do negotiated sale. When you do a revenue bond issue like this, the standard practice is to do a negotiated sale. So what we have to do here is waive competitive bidding. The city a couple years ago created a underwriters pool, and we selected 2 underwriters to help support to fulfill this transaction. They are Raymond James and UMB Bank. In addition to this, as part of this project, COTPA will be defeasing or prepaying some outstanding bonds that they have in place to date. They have about $18 million in outstanding debt, but as a result of the current interest rate environment, and it's appropriate, it's financially prudent to defease those bonds or prepay those bonds off. Typically with a bond issue, you would call them. Most bonds, when we issue them, after 10 years after they've been issued, you have a call feature where you can call the outstanding bonds. These bonds are not callable until 2023. So the appropriate thing to do is to defease them, and we will actually do that in the next 30 days, and we will defease $18 million. And the result of this, by defeasing the bonds with a lower interest rate, the interest rates will be savings from about a 4.75% interest rate to about a 3.55, which will result in an annual debt service savings of about $675,000. Our annual debt service payment will go from $1.5 million down to $825,000. In addition to that, it will save us $7.3 million over the 25 years life of the bonds, new bonds that we're issuing. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. So with that, so that's the 825 is how much we will owe per year on?
Yes, ma'am.
And so do we have a number of what that turns out to be to create the revenue per space of the parking garage?
We don't necessarily look at it like that. When we issue these bonds as a system. It's not just for this bond, for this parking garage. The revenues from the Arts District garage, the revenues from the Sheridan Walker garage, Those are all rolled into this. So we don't necessarily look at it from just this 1,100 space parking garage.
Okay, because I guess my question really boils down to, with the arts parking garage, we've gotten into a space where it's not creating the money to cover its debt service, and I'm just concerned, are we concerned about that with this new garage?
At this point in time, we're not. We feel that we have adequate cash flow to issue these bonds and to cover this new debt coverage, or this new debt service requirement.
I think, too, that when you look at it as a system, like what you're saying, if you looked at Arts District as a standalone, what you said is exactly right, but we actually support it with the full system. So the other garages that were paid off before, when we issue debt with all the revenues of the whole system backed behind that to support that debt. So it's every garage in the system helps to support that debt. And this will be all of the outstanding debt of the parking authority once we finish this. So it's closing out the debt that we had when we issued for the system, but for the purpose of constructing the Arts District garage. So this will be all of the debt. So it really reduces our debt service.
Right. Okay, well, it's just a handful of blocks from a bunch of other parking garages. So I guess my concern becomes that if we build more garages, in theory, it brings our debt service down because you're spreading that out, but then we're just inducing more demand for people to park downtown. And when we built a streetcar that, in theory, again, is supposed to get people from parking garages to places like the convention center, or from hotels to the convention center. So again, I just sort of want to keep that in mind, that if we're building more garages and it looks nice on paper that we're taking our debt service down, that we might just keep digging ourselves a hole that looks nice, but we have to keep building new garages to help float the other ones. So that's just.
Okay.
Yeah. On that note, and I've already said this in conversations with you and with Jason Fairbrush, I personally would hope that this is the last parking garage the city ever builds. As we have a streetcar, as we have a Northwest BRT that's coming online in 2023, as we have another one going to the south side, as we have another one going to the northeast side, as we're adding signal prioritization to half of our existing bus fleet, we're improving our public transportation system in such a way that with just the 3 BRTs alone, you're going to see 8 to 15-minute frequencies and park and rides along the outer edges of that system, meaning that people can park their cars at those park and rides and hop on that BRT, come down here, use the streetcar to move around, and not have to worry about parking. This is a #1 concern I hear out in Ward 2 all the time from especially residents who are older. They don't like coming downtown because one of the very first things they think of is parking expenses. So I understand the idea, let's build more garages, sure. But I think public transportation is going to help us alleviate that. So I would hope this is the very last parking garage. I actually, as a COPPA trustee, voted against selling, I think it was last summer, the parking garage we owned already, because that was a public asset that I just, debt-free. But listening to you and Jason, I'm convinced that this route is the best way to deal with the debt total for us as a system, and I'm encouraged by that. But I just want to go on record. I really do hope this is the last one. And to Councilperson Hammond's point, beautiful architectural award-winning garage next door to us, and yet its occupancy is not what it is. Not what it needs to be. And I'm to understand it's because it wasn't built in proximity to some of the major businesses. Is that why that's not at?
I think it just depends on what the demand is. I mean, you think of it right now, when we built that garage, we didn't have the spaces that are now located south of that garage. So that's a part of that. We had opportunities where we could have had other businesses move to that garage, and we built to an area where we felt like it was needed at the time as we did demand studies, and other garages have been built since that time, which has also affected our demand. So the demand has just been less on this side of the city.
That leads me, thank you for that. you would, because former COPPA trustee. That was the other question I had too about building this garage where we're building it. Could you speak to any private, like, do we anticipate that someone in the private market might want to build along this area where we're going to be putting in this new parking garage? I mean, and why they wouldn't, if they wouldn't?
There's development occurring to the west, or the east of it, but I'll remind you that once we complete the new convention center, we'll more than likely lose all the 1,000 parking spaces where the Cox Convention Center is. So that's going to go away. And we'll probably put that out for development in the near future. So that will go away. So there's a reduction in your inventory where all that activity is going down south, and that's where this new garage will benefit, the four things I mentioned previously.
Well, I'm encouraged by the savings that we'll have here, but as I said, I would hope this is the last parking garage.
Any other comments or questions for Brent? Okay. Well, we do have a resolution here, and it requires 6 affirmative votes. Oh, 7, actually, to waive competitive bidding, which I take it you desire.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, 9G1. This is the public hearing regarding dilapidated structures here listed, A through, wait, is that right? Sorry, we already did that. 9K1, resolution approving the request for salary continuation for Corporal Carlton Neal while he continues to require rehab. I don't believe we need executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9L is to enter into executive session on advice of the municipal counselor to receive confidential communications regarding Oklahoma City v. Hilltop Plaza.
Move the item into executive session.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We will handle that at the end of the meeting, or at the end of our other business, I should say. 9M, enter into executive session on advice of the municipal counselor to receive confidential communications regarding the case of Miller, Mendel, and Tyler Miller versus City of OKC.
Move the item into executive session.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We will handle that at the end of our other business. 9N1, claim recommended for denial. Don't believe we need executive session. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Claim is denied. 10A1, claims recommended for approval. Items A through D, I don't believe we need executive session. We can take it with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. This brings us to items from council. I would propose we deal with the business before we go around the horseshoe for comment. And so we have items A and B. I believe they're related to each other. Item A is a resolution initiating amendments to the Oklahoma City Municipal Code regarding HP Historic District designation process. Item 11B is an ordinance. This would be, and similar to all of our other ordinance considerations, this would be a 3-meeting cycle, and so it would be only proposed to be introduced today. In this case, referred to the Planning Commission, then set for public hearing here at the council on October 8th and a potential final hearing on October 22nd. This is introduced specifically by Councilman Greenwell and Stonecipher, so I might turn it over to either one of them would like to discuss and present.
Okay. This matter came up when we were looking at the First Christian Church, and the owner of the land did not want the designation, the landmark historical designation, and we had unfortunately had two bodies heading in two different directions. We had the HPC doing what they wanted to do. We had the city council doing what they thought was appropriate. We were looking at roughly 5 to 6 acres. The council was. The HPC was looking at the entire 38 acres. And so there was what I call the Greenwell Amendment, where if the owner does not want the landmark designation, then that is a matter that would exclusively come in front of the city council. We're the elected officials. We are the ones that must make this decision, I think, and be accountable to the voters. So that amendment to the ordinance was put together. It was then referred to Planning Commission to have Planning Commission take a look at this and make a recommendation back to us. One thing I'd point out that right after the Greenwell Amendment came before the City Council and was referred to the Planning Commission, there was a quote from the Historical Preservation Committee Chairman Alan Brown, in which he thought the Greenwell proposal was a good compromise and does not significantly affect the landmark process. So Councilman Greenwell and I thought that this process, once it went to the Planning Commission, would be something that would be resolved quickly and returned back to us. Somehow it got off track, and it has now been deferred from the Planning Commission considering it until March of 2020. And so Councilman Greenwell and I are concerned that if this issue comes up again, we have two competing bodies going in two different directions. That opens the city up to potential liability, especially in light of the June Supreme Court case that came down called Nick versus the Township of Schott. I'm not going to go into all the details of the case, but it allows plaintiffs to avoid exhausting state remedies and go straight to federal court on a taking case, where, for example, the landowner doesn't want the historical landmark designation. We place that on them. They can get to court much quicker. And if we have two bodies competing and saying different things, that's not good evidence for the federal court to be looking at. Two bodies going in two different directions. So Councilman Greenwell and I want this matter sent back to planning, and we'd like them to make a recommendation soon. And we've set deadlines for that. We don't want the recommendation coming in March of next year. Did I say that accurately, David? Was there something you'd like to add?
Well, no, I think you explained that extremely well, Mark, so thank you very much. I'd take a little bit simpler approach to this. In today's age of justice reform, this is certainly an effort to eliminate any property owner having to go before two separate bodies, hire legal assistance, and incur all the cost as well as time to present their case before two distinct bodies. And as Mark indicated, in terms of taking a property, there are two forms of taking properties. We can take title to property through eminent domain, and we have to compensate the property owner when we do that at the fair market value. Now, past few years, as we've gone through a lot of activities related to that, we continually find that our appraisals tend to be lower than what is ultimately determined. But there's a second way of taking property, and that's when we take the enjoyment of a property owner's right to enjoy their property. And we do that by placing restrictions and other restraints on the full use of that property. And if we are to do that, we need to be prepared to compensate that owner when we try to take the property, again, whether it's by title or through enjoyment. But having said all that, it just eliminates the need for unnecessary costs by the property owner when somebody attempts to force historic designation on their property. So that's about it.
So can I ask a question? I was not here when this was sent to the Planning Commission, so this is a question that might have been better asked then. I recognize this is the same ordinance that was brought to the council at that time, correct? So when I heard about this, I was under the impression it applied just to the historic landmark process, which is kind of almost a different category. You've got districts that we have where you've taken a whole neighborhood and put it in an HB district, and then you have, I think there's only like 7 or 8 historic landmarks that we've taken, and obviously First Christian Church was being considered as part of that process, correct? Am I reading, we don't have a lot of context here, and forgive me that I didn't have time to pull out the ordinance book, but just this packet seems to indicate this, what you're proposing to make a change not just to the historic landmark process, but also to the designation of districts.
We're limiting it to a historical context. And what we want is if 50% of the owners of the land, 51% of the owners of the land want this, then planning can decide this, HPC can decide this, we can decide it. But in the limited example of the First Christian Church, where the landowner did not want that designation, in effect, there's an argument that we are making a taking. Right. That we would be the only body that would decide that. And that's because we are elected officials, we're not an appointed committee, and that's because we do not want to have two bodies going in 2 different directions, which is exactly what happened with the HPC was doing one thing and we were doing another. Right. And so all I'm saying is I don't want to defer this until March 2020 when the president of the chairman of the Historical Preservation Committee, Alan Brown, said the Greenwell proposal is a good compromise. And he also said that it does not significantly affect the landmark process. It's a very, very limited.
So that's interesting. So he mentioned the landmark process. That's what I'm trying to hone in on.
All I'm reading from is the channel line.
Right. What I'm trying to hone in on is, I think why this could face more opposition than it maybe should, because as you said, maybe it's a narrow, intended to be narrow, but it's being broadly applied to the districts, right? I mean, I don't know that we have any record of anyone trying to make an application for a district over the objections of a majority of the property owners. We have this anecdotal example that you're reacting to about First Christian Church. Why not? Why is this not just applicable to the HL process? Was that an intentional
I think you need to read the code language, and I think you'll be much more comfortable that it's narrow in its interpretation.
Okay.
And so one of the things I think that got this off the path was there was an article and some emails that thought that that David and I were upset with something with the Planning Commission, and we're not upset with the Planning Commission at all. They do a great job, and they're a great benefit to us, and that's why we refer things to them. And we just wanted this thing to be decided sooner than March of 2020. That's the only context in which this came up. We're not mad at anybody. We're not upset with anybody. We just don't want them to defer a ruling on this for so long in case it comes up again, whether it be the First Christian Church or some other piece of property.
Okay. Well, I'll dig in because I want it to match the intent that you described to me months ago, which was about the historic designation process, not the whole district process. And so I'll dig in on that. I do have another follow-up question about the resolution. So if I had a disagreement with the actions of the Planning Commission in their process and their choices, I guess the first thing I'd do is I'd call Janice Powers and I'd talk to her. So has that conversation occurred? Because
I have, Janice called me, I called her back.
Okay.
We talked about getting together for coffee and talking, but that has not happened yet, and I look forward to that conversation.
Okay. I mean, does it make you at all, it makes me a little uncomfortable to be firing resolutions back and forth at each other. I mean, when we're just human beings in a big small town like Oklahoma City.
I agree with you completely, 100%. But I think the only thing that we kind of differ on is I don't want to wait till March 2020 to decide this.
Right, I understand that.
And the great thing about this, all we're doing is referring it back to planning. We can still look at it, and we still have a final vote to take after planning makes its recommendation. And you may say, Mark, this resolution's too broad. We need to tighten that up, and we have the time to do that. That just keeps this moving forward where we don't end up in March 2020 debating.
Okay. All right, I've talked enough.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I am concerned that you don't give the necessary support to the majority, that a minority of, say, property owners could force this on the majority that doesn't want it.
Right. I understand the argument you're making. And it's just that it started with historic landmark designation, and it seems to have potentially broadened to district designation.
Well, we've got members of our legal department here that could address some of those issues.
Amanda, do you have any reaction to that comment?
The HL designation process is under the same section of our code as the HP designation process. So we don't have a special call out for HL designation to initiate that process. We'd probably have to draft a new section of the code, which we could present to council. What we did is, for the initiation process, we made the change that was requested by the council members.
Of course. Okay. Councilman Cooper.
Thanks. I want to speak to this, but I would actually, can we hear from some citizens?
Yeah,
because I've heard from a lot of citizens about this.
We have two who have signed up to speak. Maybe that's a good place to go. So we'll start with Judy Federa.
Good morning. My name is Judy Federa, 905 Northwest 41st Street. I'm mostly retired, which is one of the reasons I could be here at such short notice. I am a community volunteer and work part-time at the Health Science Center. I've lived in Crown Heights for the last 5 years. I chose to live there. I knew it was a designated historic preservation district, and I was aware of the constraints that come with. My house is like any house. Its value has a lot to do with the strength of the neighborhood. As I perceive a very strong threat to my neighborhood coming from this proposal. It threatens my financial security, my financial investment in my home. It threatens to destroy my neighborhood, and it threatens to damage my city government. The proposal will give the City Council the exclusive right to strip my neighborhood of its HP status at the council's whim. It won't need to confer with anybody first. Not the HP Commission, not the city's own planning commission, and certainly not the property owners that these gentlemen purport to be concerned with. The City Council will not be held accountable for doing any due diligence, nor adhering to any urban master plan that may exist. This is bad for me and my neighborhood, and it is a really poor move for any city to make to remove the City Council's accountability and transparency. It's curious to me that the two city councilmen are putting so much effort into trying to control the HP designations. Neither of their wards contain any HP district, so it's doubtful that this is a pressing issue with the constituents they represent. The fact is, Oklahoma covers more land than any U.S. city except for Jacksonville, Florida. Presumably, there are plenty of development opportunities elsewhere outside of the HP districts. Or there are closer-in neighborhoods that could really use a leg up. So what are Councilman Stonecipher and Greenwell up to? Why are they trying to rush this process? Last month, they actually asked the Planning Commission's Urban Development Committee to vote on this proposal, but were turned down because the master planning process is still 6 months from completion. That is why they wanted to wait till March. So here we are today with the same proposal and a request to expedite the process so it can be voted on in October. Since last spring, these two councilmen have spearheaded multiple efforts to change HP designations that affect our home and HP district, which are not in their wards. If the status of HP districts in Oklahoma City is so pressing an urban problem to these two men, then the whole issue should be aired, researched, and carefully considered and revised by qualified individuals, some of whom are employees of the city, not pushed through for a quick and dirty fix. Why should a city keep its historic preservation districts? There are myriad reasons and lots of recent research about why and how to do it. Here are just 2 reasons from an article from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. 1, historic districts help strengthen communities and attract people back to cities, which I know we're trying to do. 2, regulating historic districts properly can help protect a property owner's investment. Thank you. I'm concerned about this. The article goes on to explain, and I quote, Regulations are intended to prevent the demolition or inappropriate alteration of historic properties and thus the fabric of the historic district that gives the property their value. These rules can be particularly useful, and they offer predictability for residents and for those considering an investment in that community. And I'm still quoting, "These rules can be particularly useful in times of economic crisis, national disasters, or even just in the event that irresponsible private interests surface." Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just
Sure.
wanted to
Councilman Stone.
ask a question. Do you see any way this could possibly be used to reverse a current designation?
Is that maybe an Amanda question?
Yeah, I mean, that brings, the question you raised I thought was a good one, but I've never seen this or thought of this as being used where we would go to a neighborhood and say, well, now we're stripping away your designation.
So the process for designation, amending, repealing a HP district is the section that is proposed for amendment here. The amendment provides that unless the property owner has an objection, well, if more than 50% of the property owner don't agree to it, then it's only council who can initiate the process. The process is still the same. Okay. So it still goes to HP, it still goes to Planning Commission, it still comes back to council for actual approval. It's the initiation of that process. So technically, if you had a HP district where the property owners, more than 50% of them, disagreed with either the repealing of the HP district or the amending of the HP district, they would be required to go to council to initiate that process, but just that for the purposes of initiating. If the property owners agreed, then HP could still initiate it, Planning Commission still could still initiate it.
Yeah, so restate that. If Heritage Hill, if somebody wanted to do away with Heritage Hill's HP designation today, the HP Commission could initiate that, and we could initiate it today. And
correct.
After the adoption of this, only we could initiate that.
Only if there were if 51% or more than 50% of the property owners did not agree, it would be limited to council who could initiate that process.
I guess the thing that I'm most concerned about is, let's take the First Christian Church as an example. We know that the owner of the property, their church membership is down to 48, and they're trying to keep this church alive, and they need some funds and to move to a different location, and they don't want the landmark designation. And so if we impose that upon them when they are opposed to it, who's going to pay for it when their lawyer, David Box, goes to federal court, files a taking lawsuit? Are we going to buy the First Christian Church? Are we going to get in the business of every time something like this happens and the owner does not want it? Are we going to start buying all those properties? I don't think that's a wise thing for us to be, the way to be spending our money.
Ms. Videra, you've already spoken, but if it's very brief and you feel like you've got to say something to retort, I'll allow it.
I respectfully think that the First Christian Church property is part of what gives Crown Heights its value and the homes in there its value. And you can take it off because there's a separate owner, but you can't take it off in terms of the overall value of the area. And doing so, there must be a different way to deal with this that is not going to hurt the owners who currently
over $11 million.
Who currently bought into this area with the expectation that there was that was all part of the Historic Preservation District.
Okay, thank you.
When there's an estimate over $11 million in renovations because of asbestos, structural issues, HVAC issues, who's going to take on that responsibility? When we get sued for a taking, are we going to buy the First Christian, and then are we going to renovate it, and are we going to keep it? I mean, it's a lot of money. And so I think it needs to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I don't think it's going to come up every day. But when it does come up, I think this body that was elected into office should be the one to decide that limited instance.
Okay.
Mark, Todd, I'd like to respond to your question. Again, it's a reasonable, fair question. But the answer is no, we could not initiate any action unless the majority of the people wanted their neighborhood to be changed in designation. And Amanda, let me ask you this. if you've got a neighborhood that's currently not zoned as historic preservation area, and if as few as 10 or 15% of the homeowners wanted their area to be designated, could they initiate that despite the 85 to 90% other homeowners in the neighborhood not wanting it?
Go ahead.
No, they couldn't petition and force it, but right now the Planning Commission, the City Council, or the HP Commission could initiate that.
Well, I understand. And they could rule against the 85 to 90% majority who did not want historic preservation. That's what we're concerned about.
So right now, that process could be initiated by any of the three bodies, HP, Planning Commission, or the council.
Yeah.
And so then they would go through the process of reviewing, doing the research, the staff would provide a report,
Sure.
which would then be considered
Right.
by HP, Planning Commission, and ultimately come to City Council.
Yeah.
It's just the initiation process that's being changed as part of this ordinance.
Right, and we would still welcome their input. They could come here and speak to us. It just avoids or prevents the property owner from having to incur duplicate legal costs and other expenses associated with this effort. Let them have one hearing in front of the City Council. Yes.
Do we want to get to, yeah, go ahead, and then we'll get to the
Quick
citizens.
question to clarify, because I feel a little confused. So I'm hearing that if this was passed and a minority of property owners in an HP area wanted to get rid of HP district designation, they could come to a council member and the council member could initiate the process.
No, it has to be majority.
Only council, under the proposed ordinance, only council would be able to initiate that process if you didn't have more than 50% of the property owners.
Okay, just want to clear that.
Okay, Trina Davis, and that could, I know that could be.
That would be Brian.
Brian, oh my gosh.
My handwriting is atrocious.
Well, of course. Hi,
And
Brian,
that
how are you
said,
doing?
good. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you again. Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, my name is Brian Davis. I reside at 905 Northwest 41st Street and appear before you today as the historic preservation representative of the Crown Heights Edgemere Heights Neighborhood Association. Our community is comprised of some 600 homes with approximately 1,500 residents. Now, maybe what we're dealing with here today is legislation that I think is poorly written. I think some of the verbiage strikes me, as a journalist who used to cover government and politics, strikes me as alarmingly vague. So with that said, I will tell you that as they are written, our association is emphatically opposed to the amendments being proposed to Chapter 59 of the Zoning and Planning Code. Our association believes this legislation to be ill-conceived and the attempt to accelerate its implementation both rash and hasty. We are, to be frank, uneasy about how quickly this follows on the heels of the Council's decision previously to suspend landmark designation proceedings on First Christian Church, removing, as it did, opportunities for our community to be fully heard on that matter. And I will tell you, Councilman Stonecipher, that I have grave reservations about that property. I am pro-preservation, but I am also anti-white elephant, and we need to consider all of this. But there was a well-defined process in place for decades, which the Council, in its wisdom, chose to circumvent without consultation or prior warning, and our association considers that action to be regrettable. When my family moved to Oklahoma in 2008, we initially settled in Nichols Hills, but within a very short time grew uneasy with the trend of buyers and developers knocking down homes and replacing them with houses that were not only much larger, but out of scale and out of proportion to their surroundings. Neighbors suddenly found their views and their light obliterated and the quality of their lives forever altered. Some, in fact, moved away, as we did, intentionally, to an historic preservation district where that kind of thing cannot happen, and where there is, again, a well-defined and time-tested process which safeguards the character of a neighborhood where, I will emphasize again, some 1,500 people choose to call home. In Nichols Hills, the planning and zoning process failed. The rules were unevenly applied, and I see a similar danger here, all of us being human, in terms of the old game of what you know and who you know. Guess what? Nichols Hills is now in the process of adopting a design review process. They are actually going in the opposite direction of what is being proposed here, because they have learned that in the end what they were allowing was detrimental to their city, that property rights must be balanced with community rights, and that homeowners have some obligation to their neighbors. Our association supports the decision by the Planning Commission's Urban Development Committee to defer action on the amendments to Chapter 59 pending conclusion of the Preserve OKC process in March of next year. That's only 6 months away. We believe the extra time would allow people with every point of view on the subject to come to the table and be properly heard. And I have to tell you, in just a couple of days since I first posted about this on social media, there has developed a very respectful and constructive dialogue out of which has come a clear message that we do need to reconsider some elements of our preservation philosophy. Rushing, however, to seize control of the process to the extent that the City Council would have the power to declassify buildings or even entire neighborhoods designated as HP sites, and again, that's the way I read this thing as it's written right now, that will not serve the public interest in either the short or the long term. On behalf of the Crown Heights Edgemere Heights Neighborhood Association, I conclude by saying simply, that dog ain't going to hunt in our neighborhood, and we urge you to engage with us rather than to dictate and to vote no on this resolution and these amendments. Thank you very much.
Hey, Brian, I want to thank you for your comments, and I want to make sure we're communicating. The reason we're referring this to the Planning Commission is to get their input. And if we haven't done a good job on drafting the language, we hope that you will give that input to the Planning Commission.
Absolutely,
and we
sir.
can make revisions out of it. But we're not trying to ram anything down anyone's throat. We're not trying to rush anything. We just don't want to have an issue sit there and get into the same fix we were last time with two bodies going in two different directions, and we were threatened with a lawsuit for a taking.
Well, I appreciate that.
And let me finish.
Yes, sir.
All I know is that the Historical Preservation Committee Chairman Alan Brown told Channel 9 he thinks the proposal, the Greenwell proposal, is a good compromise. If you don't think it is, go visit with planning when they look at this and make suggestions. If you don't think it is, go talk to our legal division and say, this is where it's not clear. We'll work with you. We're here to help people. We're not here to ram things down people's throat. We're not here to be a dictator. And so we want to get along with you. We want to work with you. We want to make this thing work, okay?
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much, because I do look forward to participating in the process, and I think that we can find some common ground here. I just felt like with this thing being posted Friday afternoon and the vote coming up as quickly as it did, I'm talking about, you know, to a layman and a citizen, I just felt that it was important to come here and
This has already come before us
speak.
once before, and it has already gone to the Planning Commission, and it got deferred until March of 2020.
Right.
And so we're trying to keep the process moving forward. We welcome your input. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, I'd like to say, with this Channel 9 story, I'm curious to know the whole story as to what all of his comments are instead of just that sentence. But when I think about what we're looking at, if I'm not mistaken, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, this initiation occurred and happened because of the previous Ward 2 councilman who initiated this process. Am I correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Then it went to the Historic Preservation Committee to complete that initiation. And
Well,
if I'm
not exactly.
okay,
They
but
did
when
their own thing.
Well, that process is that's not right, but it did go there. When it went to the Historic Preservation Committee for them to decide what to do as far as this property is concerned, correct me if I'm wrong, someone from Historic Preservation, the decision was made because of the previous landmark form application. It included the full property. So that is why this application from the Historic Preservation also included the full property. Am I correct? Okay. So therefore, I'm kind of confused where the argument is when it came to them following what they know and the previous application of the historic designation in the first place. And my concern as we're looking at this is, you know, I had a case when we talked about the Brockway Center, and we found out that it's under capital medical zoning, so there's technically nothing we can do about it in the first place. But when I look at other places that are within the Deep Deuce area that are very vulnerable, it concerns me. Because if we have someone who decides, oh, we just don't want it. We don't want this to be landmarked or designated. And this building has been up since the 1930s. Excuse me, why are we deciding to raise a building just because someone doesn't want that when it has historical reference, significance, and it is of utmost importance to this community and to our city? And the fact that we don't have that many places that have been designated in the first place. So that's a concern when we're looking at that. But I think we have to pay attention again to the fact that this began because of the previous Ward 2 councilman. That's how this process was initiated in the first place. And that's all I have to say.
Amanda, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. When we considered it, the city council, it was just looking at like 5 to 7 acres, right?
Right, so when it was first brought up by Councilman Shadid, it was limited to just the corner. Council deferred the item. It went to HP. HP had it on their agenda for consideration for initiation. They initiated the process as to the entire property, which was the larger footprint. The HP process never fully went through.
Clear on is we did not refer that to the HP. That was the HP taking its own action.
The HP took their own action.
And they took it as to the full 38 acres when we were only looking at the corner, which was approximately 5 acres. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But that was based on the previous application, correct?
Councilman Shadid presented it as only the corner for discussion among council. Council never took any action on that matter. When HP started it or considered it at their first meeting, they considered it as to the entire parcel. Now, they never finished the process, and part of that process is staff coming forward, doing the research, putting together a recommendation. As part of staff's process, they could have recommended it be reduced down to only the corner rather than the full acreage. They did not finish that process because council revoked the HP initiation.
And I guess the discussion that we have to have, and I think it's a healthy discussion, is when we find ourselves, each property is different and each has its own peculiar circumstances. But when we find ourselves in a situation that the owner cannot make $11 million in repairs, that the owner needs to sell the property, are we going to start buying those properties? And on a case-by-case basis, I think we can look at that. But I don't think we can go into the real estate business.
Well, I don't think I say we need to go into the real estate business per se, but I think we need to pay attention when, again, this process began, the way it began, how it went to the HP, how they work within the HP to make sure that they are following the correct guidelines. And the reason I know that part is because of what happened in the process of when we were dealing with the Brockway Center. So that's the part that I do know.
Sure.
And they had to go through that process, and that's how the designation came for the full property. And again, we understand the process. It stopped in mid-consideration, and that's obviously the problem. It stopped in mid-consideration, so now we're here. But I feel as if it had already been initiated, so we're asking for literally what's already taken place.
And I think we do agree on one point, and that is that when we are considering a specific piece of property, I think it's healthy and I think it's good that we have the ability to refer things to the Planning Commission and to HPC where we need additional guidance. And so I think we agree on that point. In your case, you were dealing with a different organization, and I don't know much about that. I have looked at the HPC, and in my mind, they were heading down a road that was going to lead to us being sued in federal court, and we were going to have a taking case where we would have paid a lot of money for taking that property. And I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that.
May I? And I have a really hard time speaking about this, if I'm being honest. I'm processing my emotions on this. hearing from two council people, Greenwell and Stonecipher, be concerned about the moment where this got moved over into HP after Councilman Shadid initiated the process, that then the HP realized that the whole land, that there was 33 acres, it was not just the corner, right? That there was a legal reason why they would have to reconsider that. And I understand that that's where a lot of the concern comes in from the two council people. I think my concern here is very profound, actually, because as I've been reading Boomtown with my college students, both at OCU and UCO, I think what's concerning to me about ultimately this particular proposal is that Ward 2 is home to the majority of these HP neighborhoods. Ward 2 is home to the majority of historic districts like the Uptown, 39th Street, Paseo. And so when I say to you all that I hear concerns about this proposal, I'm hearing it from all across my ward. And then I hear it also from people in Ward 6 and Ward 7. And when I read the history of Oklahoma City, I realize that our city begins in these three parts of town. And thusly, the history is there. And when I say I'm having a hard time talking about this is, it seems like your minds are made up and my perspective is different. And what I am now struggling to do is to figure out, where do we find stasis between the three of us? Well, really the wards who are affected by this. I genuinely mean I don't know how to do it, but I just want to read briefly something to maybe give you a better sense of how my mind works. And it's from Boomtown. This was Lola Mae Smeltzer. She was the wife of Angelo Schott, and he was a very important civic leader here. And on 15th Street, they would have a book club. And this was from a book they read called Midnight on the Desert. And just briefly, again, this is literally how my brain works. I think like this. And this is from that book. This is about the past, the eternal now. Our consciousness travels along this track as we might travel on a railway journey. Then the past is the station we have just left, and the future is the station we are approaching. The past has not been destroyed any more than the last station was destroyed when the train left it. Just as the station is still there with its porters and ticket inspectors and bookstalls and its noise and bustle, so the past still exists. Not as a dim memory, but in all its color and hum. Somewhere back along that fourth dimensional track of the world, the dinosaurs are still roving, the ice age is melting, men are building the pyramids in Babylon, and Caesar is being assassinated. Shakespeare is just finishing Hamlet, and Lincoln is making his Gettysburg speech. Nothing, not a syllable, not the wink of an eyelash has been lost. All its past is in existence along this track, not as a ghostly memory, a shadow show, but solidly real in its own eternal present. When I bike from Paseo here in the mornings, I imagine an Oklahoma City 100 years ago. I mean, truly, these words, I imagine Angelo Schott and Lola living on 15th and 16th Street. I imagine the people creating Paseo, a Spanish village. And I feel it is my duty as a public servant to protect and honor this history. I can't sleep at night whenever I get these sort of emails from people who are concerned about their neighborhoods and about their areas with real concern, because as we know, right across from where this building is, a main street where we demolished John A. Brown and we demolished our department stores, we demolished our older buildings that had history. So Ward 2 and Ward 6 and Ward 7 are deeply concerned. In fact, in Ward 7, I learned over here when we finally discovered oil, quote, on the east side, the black community's only public park, a place where Roscoe Dungy had lobbied hard in the Black Dispatch. When it was discovered to be sitting on top of oil, so the city took it and pumped the land for all it was worth. So there is a history in these three, in the inner city, of our buildings being destroyed, our history not being honored, and our people not feeling like the past and what they've done matters. That's the concern here. And I don't know that we're going to resolve this on this horseshoe today, but I think we have got to start talking with each other more about these concerns and find that stasis. And I don't know how, but I'm trying.
I don't think we'll resolve it today, but I agree with you that history should be preserved. And you and I have met with staff, and I think it's important to note, we'll continue to try to save the First Christian Church. That's high on my list of things to do. But in this instance, all we're asking is that this be sent back to the Planning Commission, that they give us some advice, they conduct some hearings and get input from people. Brian, for example, can go talk to legal and make some suggestions to revise it to make it a better ordinance. I'm all for that. We won't have a final vote until a couple of months down the road. And everybody can have input. We're not trying to rush anything through. But I think it's important that we just don't sit out there where competing bodies can go in different directions. I think it's bad legally. I think it's really bad in light of the United States Supreme Court decision in June of this year.
James, I would respond to your comments by just saying there's a lot of areas in Oklahoma City that I have a strong interest in preserving. But if it ever goes against the desires of the property owner, I need to be prepared to compensate that property owner for forcing that property owner to do something that they don't want. And that's all I'm asking from everybody who's came up to speak. You're concerned about how this may impact you financially. Well, but you've yet to speak how your actions will impact the property owner financially. And until you come up with a method to compensate that property owner, I'm not going to listen, because that property owner does have rights in this country, and property rights go back to the formation of this country. Now, for people who don't own property, those concepts may be difficult to understand, but it's an important issue. You need to be prepared to compensate the property owner for any actions that you take that damages the value of that property. And yet no one talks about that.
I would love to see the city figure out what a
wait, not public money.
Well, then I don't, then honestly, Councilman, I don't know what to say, because I just quoted to you from our own history where this particular body took a public park from black folk who lived just over there in the Innovation District.
And may I mention, were actual property at
owners.
Different parts.
And whenever we take title, we are forced to compensate the property owner. When we take enjoyment by putting restrictions on property, up to this point in time, we don't compensate anybody. And that's all I'm saying, is our actions do have impact on property owners' property. And until we come forward, not with public money, because if you took a vote of all the people in Oklahoma City, I don't think they would support every action in this regard. Look to private funds. Everybody that has an interest in historical buildings come together and compensate that property owner to preserve that property. Again, with the First Christian Church, they don't have the funds to bring that church back to its proper status. If it's a concern of the community, let the community pull together, raise the money, and restore that building.
That would be great if this state was not one of the lowest in terms of income for its individuals.
But yet we're one of the highest in terms of contributions, James.
Which is great, wonderful. But what I'm saying is there are parts of town that are historic where the incomes, and you just heard from Councilwoman Nice 2 weeks ago about the health outcomes, the income outcomes.
We're talking about Crown Heights, aren't we?
Well, I'm talking about all kinds of parts
We're talking about First Christian
We are
Church.
talking about what the
It's gonna affect all.
Sorry,
Okay,
I
now
don't want
we're
to speak
getting off
over people.
subject.
I don't want to speak over people.
This will affect more than just Crown Heights. And if we're talking about the city not being in the real estate business, I think that is a joke, because we got in the real estate business when we started eminent domaining Black neighborhoods, use public money to probably not give them the value of their property to build public highways and public facilities that are now the OU Health Science Center with public money. So we have already done that. And so it's really hard for me to think that we can't find other ways with public money to do the same thing when we've been doing it for decades. So this feels like something that is like there's one particular situation and we're trying to like create this giant change for one situation that will affect other areas of the city, and particularly areas of the wards 2, 6, and 7. So, and to the point of not rushing it, we sent it to Planning Commission. They gave us essentially their opinion. They want to wait till March until we have more of an idea of what the Preserve OKC plan recommends as far as processes and policies. That was their recommendation. So let's wait.
And this will affect Ward 2, not just First Christian, but, and by the way, I'm still excited working with Mark. Councilman Stonecipher. He and I are working with, seeing what we can do to preserve where he went to school, and, we're going to be talking with Crown Heights neighborhood to see what we can figure out. But there are other places in Ward 2 that have my attention as well, like the Gold Dome. And yeah, I will go on record right now and say that I would like for us as a city, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector, maybe it's coming together, but we do need to look comprehensively at the things that have defined the character of this place, good and bad.
And once again,
Stone's been waiting to speak for a long time.
I want to thank our two speakers that came up today. You did raise some important questions for me, and I never envisioned this being used as something to possibly take away what has already been historically preserved. So I think that's a very good point. I think when it gets deferred back to the Planning Commission, it's very important maybe that they work on that language to make sure that what we have preserved stays preserved. But I do have concerns on when instances come up like this, and we're going to get sued, and I mean, we always get sued, so what's new? But when we get sued, I at least like to get sued for something that we did as a group versus something someone else did that then we get sued. So, and in terms of accountability, I feel completely accountable. I mean, the residents of Ward 4 will vote me in, vote me out, whatever they decide. But to me, that's the ultimate accountability. But I do appreciate your bringing that concern. I think it's a very valid concern that needs addressed. Thanks.
Councilwoman Nice. What will we do with the items?
I move the item.
So you're talking, this is, well, why don't we take them one at a time? You're moving the resolution, item 11A?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Got a motion in a second? All right, I'll say something. This is not how I do things, and we didn't talk about this resolution. You didn't bring this to me, so I would have said this at that time, but I'll sleep at night regardless of what happens here. I just want you to know why I'll be voting no, because I would prefer to exhaust every opportunity for collaboration before we would send this resolution, which is very adversarial, back to our Planning Commission. So that's why I will be voting no.
And I don't mean for it to be adversarial, and Janice called me right before the subcommittee met. I did not get a hold of her before they met. I mean, it was, I think, within hours before the subcommittee met. I called her back, and we are going to sit down and talk. And I agree with you that it should not normally happen in this fashion. But a decision was made to move that to March 20th without calling and talking to me about it.
Okay.
One person example. And so I agree with you that we should always sit down and talk. We should always work together. And I wish Janice and I would have talked before that subcommittee meeting, and I feel bad about that.
Okay. Any further discussion on item 11A? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes 5-4. All right. We have item 11B also on the agenda. So we have a motion and a second. So I want to be very clear. So this is an ordinance being introduced for consideration. So that is a formality, really. It is not the final passage. As is stated here, it goes to the Planning Commission. It would have a public hearing at this body October 8th and a potential final hearing October 22nd, even though, in my experience, I should point out that on particularly controversial ordinances, that final hearing on that date usually never happens. It gets deferred about 6 times. So I don't know when the final vote will be, but it could be as early as October 22nd. Yeah.
If they come back with modification to the language, we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
We want the issue addressed.
Right.
Totally support that.
Yeah. And the issue that I understood was that...
Who has to be satisfied with that language?
Say that again, I'm sorry? Okay.
Who technically has to be satisfied with that language? Because in place, as it is, it's already working.
I have seen items that are introduced, okay? A councilperson comes up with a change they want in the resolution. They go to Kenny's office, they make the change, and then we discuss it on the horseshoe. That's happened before.
And that's fine. But I think, again, we're making decisions for the wards that are going to be most vulnerable and most affected. And they had no input in this conversation.
Right. So there will be still multiple more opportunities for that. I can't imagine, some of you weren't here when we did the scooter ordinances and the home sharing ordinances. I don't think they looked anything like, in their final passage, what they looked like the day they were introduced, the process that's happening today. So
change after change after change.
Right.
And everybody had input, and I hope that will be the case with this.
all I'll say is, as I understand it, the issue was that the HP initiated an HL designation on First Christian Church, which froze that church for 180 days, and your concern was the taking cost potential of that 180 days. Yeah, I understand that, and probably lose. And so there would be a cost associated with that. And that issue, though, has led to...
It's a cost to not only the value of the land,
right,
but it's also a cost of how are you going to refurbish that?
Right, I understand that. And so so some members of this body feel that when costs are incurred, this body should be the one to make that decision. And in the stay process that we currently have of 180 days, the HP can make that decision. Okay. But the wording of this as introduced has caused people to come up here and talk about their entire HP neighborhoods being wiped away, you know, and so that's...
And that is not the intent.
We have gone far afield.
That's not the intent, and that's why we welcome their input, and that's why if someone wants to come and talk to Kenny and his staff, and they come up with better language, I'm all open, all ears, all willing to look at it, and probably will agree with it.
Okay, I appreciate that, but
it can be separated out. You could separate the HL
I know
from
you
the
can.
HB.
I understand sort of the convenient statutory construction reasons why this approach was taken, and I'm just saying it didn't work, in my opinion. So I'm voting for introduction, but I would not vote for this ordinance in final passage without that type of, take it back to what I understood to be the original intent, which was a very narrow amendment to a very rarely used option, you know, and now we're talking about basically the fundamental deconstruction of historic preservation in Oklahoma City, and that is, I think, a byproduct of an ordinance that was written too broadly. So,
and that's not what we intend to do.
yeah. Okay. All right. So we did have a motion and a second to introduce the ordinance. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. The ordinance is introduced 6-3. Right. Yes. Okay. So now it goes to Planning Commission. It is subject to, I guess, the requests made in the previous resolution there, and then it will set for public hearing here October 8th. Okay.
Your Honor, just real quick.
Yes.
Can I say thank you to my Ward 2 people for coming, and to anyone watching at home in Ward 2. I'm a bit speechless, which y'all know is kind of hard for me. But I just want to say to all the people who are watching in Ward 2, please know that your Ward 2 council person loves you, respects you, and knows how hard you have fought since the 1960s and 70s to revitalize an inner city that was left behind, and I will always have your back. I will always have your back, and I am not happy about this.
Brian, please call me and let's sit down and talk and let's look at the language together. Thank you.
All right, we'll go around the horseshoe. Councilman Griner. McAtee. No. No. Councilman Greenland. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I just want to say and mention that it is Suicide Prevention Week. I know as we talk about September, it is also Suicide Prevention Month. And the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255 or 211. And Heartline, who is also part of our continuum services on our okc.gov website, is a valued nonprofit and answers a call for 76 of our 77 counties for Oklahoma when it comes to suicide prevention. So I would just encourage everyone to find out more information about how we can be that listening ear. Volunteers are needed. You can go to heartlineoklahoma.org, or there's also information at bethe2to.com. Again, suicide is something we don't talk about enough. And there are methods that are in place, QPR, question, persuade, refer. I know, obviously, with Councilwoman Hammond being a part of Mental Health Association of Oklahoma, she's aware of those programs. There's Assist, and there are other programs, and I commend Heartline for the work that they do, answering the call, and those listening ears that listen, and also make sure that people are safe within Oklahoma County. So I just want to commend them for that, and also, again, recognize Suicide Prevention Week. And also want to say, give a shout out to my neighbors with the Capital Medical Neighborhood Association. They had their Neighbors Night Out Saturday, and we had a blast. I mean, they had that park jumping. And we also had our firefighters, our police officers. We had the Sheriff's Department. We had Waste Management, OG&E. So you name it, they were there, and just a lot of smiling faces. And that was my first one, and I do not plan on that being my last one. So looking forward to visiting with more neighbors this evening for our Neighbors Night Out. So I hope everyone will come out, and especially my neighborhood, Ravenwood Manor. Looking forward to seeing them this evening.
Can I
Absolutely.
just follow up? Councilman Nice reminded me about the QPR. Mental Health Association Oklahoma is hosting a free community QPR at Catholic Charities next Wednesday at noon. So if anyone is interested in getting that suicide prevention training for Suicide Awareness Month, it's an hour-long training in the upstairs conference room at Catholic Charities. Thanks.
All right, item 12, city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Chief Gorley is here today. Periodically, we'll have, are you going to introduce Doug? So Doug will give a quick introduction, but periodically we'll do presentations on the council priorities. This one we're actually splitting into two presentations. So we'll have our police chief, Wade Gorley, make a presentation today. We'll have the planning department make another presentation on another portion of this priority. I think October the 8th is what we're targeting. So Doug, if you want to just introduce this.
Right. Periodically, we come before you to update progress on the 7 priorities that Council adopted in January 2017. Today's priority is to continue to pursue social and criminal justice initiatives. The text of the priority is, all people deserve to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. Pursuit of these values provides unity within our community to move our city forward and place us at the forefront of communities which seek the betterment of all people. We will ensure equitable justice through continued criminal justice reform and increased engagement with residents and community groups. We will support our partners and promote access to social services that facilitate a better future for those in need. And so today, Chief Gorley is going to talk about what the police department is doing in the area of criminal justice. And as City Manager said, on October 8th, the Planning Director, Jeff Butler, will talk about social justice areas. So, Chief Gorley.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Wade Gorley, Chief of Police. Again, this is the LFR council priorities in social justice, social and criminal justice initiatives. The main things we're going to be talking about today is the percent of residents citywide reporting they feel safe, percentage of officers who've received procedural justice training, percentage of change in the number of people incarcerated for municipal charges, and the number of inmate days utilized for municipal charges. So this first slide that deals with this, we'll talk about the citizen survey. The current one was sent out in August. We hope to have the results back in October. Last year's results were at 50%. Our goal is 55%, so hopefully we're working towards improving that. The percentage of officers who have received procedural justice training, something that's been very important to us. It's defined as the idea of fairness in the processes that resolve disputes and allocate resources. It's a philosophy and a practice which promotes positive organizational change, builds police legitimacy in the community, and enhances officer safety. 100% of our officers have received procedural justice training, and they'll continue to receive it. The department's going to continue to implement these type of concepts. If we don't do this, what will happen is there'll be a negative perception and decreased cooperation and satisfaction among our citizens, and there'll also be a decreased ability to recruit candidates. One thing that's very interesting, when I sit on hiring boards, I find oftentimes we have recruits apply from other states, and what I've noticed is I ask them oftentimes what brings them here, and they say that the positive image that the Oklahoma City Police Department has, and part of that is due to procedural justice. We also have a policy that directly addresses this so that our officers know, they're very familiar with it. When we train on it, we know what we train based off of our policy. Some of the initiatives that go along with procedural justice, obviously our implementation of body-worn cameras. We have 345 total cameras in the field now that serve approximately 700 officers. So it covers pretty much all of our officers that are in a patrol-related or a community interaction function. That includes our patrol officers, our gang enforcement unit, homeless outreach team, the bicycle unit, the marshals that work out of the courts, the airport, our overtime programs, and then also too recently our motorcycle officers have been equipped with cameras. Excuse me. Implementation of de-escalation procedures and training. This has been something we've been doing for quite a while now. The actual de-escalation procedure was implemented in February of 2018, but this is something that's been ingrained in police work for a long time. It just didn't have a formal name. This is how officers go out and deal with situations and hopefully bring them to a successful conclusion without getting in a confrontation. What we also did as part of our implementation was we include now in our use of force, when a use of force incident occurs and is investigated by a supervisor and run through the chain of command, it also includes a separate investigation, so to speak, or a look at de-escalation too. So the officer's evaluated on not only the use of force, was it justified and appropriate, but was the de-escalation appropriate too? So we want to make sure that officers are utilizing these skills and these techniques that we're training on. We want to train on implicit bias, which we've done. We've provided implicit bias training to all of our officers during in-service and to all recruits in the academy. They now receive this as they come on too, so it keeps us at that 100%. We had a group come in a couple of years ago with the Department of Justice approved program that not only did they teach our officers or teach us this program, but they trained some of our officers to become instructors in it as well. So we now have certified trainers in this program. Increased community outreach. Community outreach is just who we are. It's what we do. I think you guys see that on a regular basis if you follow our social media. But there's a lot of things that are unseen that our officers do on a daily basis that I myself and my deputy chiefs and my other commanders do just as part of who we are in our daily routine to make sure we're engaged in the community, because we have to be engaged in order to serve the community. Some other things with this, coordinating with municipal, county, and state government to address justice reform. We've been very active in that, sitting on many boards and looking at many changes. I'll talk about here in a little bit some of those, but that's something we've been very active in doing as a police department. Increased crisis intervention team officers. We're authorized for 158 CIT positions. This is an increase from the 140 we had 2 years ago. And right now, we're going to hold a class later this month that'll have 8 of our officers and 18 officers from outside agencies that will be training as well. And that 8 that we will be training in this class will get us to that 158, which is the amount that we're supposed to have. The thing to remember too is that all of our officers receive mental health training. It's not just limited to our CIT officers. We get it in the academy. We do this regularly too, and also with our scenario-based training, we address mental health issues and dealing with individuals that are struggling with mental health, because we don't want those to escalate into something that is not necessary when someone's just trying to get our help. So another, I'm sorry, skipped ahead a little bit here. Our partnership with Oklahoma Department of Mental Health is another way too that these initiatives are going through. We received a 4-year grant with the Department of Mental Health dedicated to planning and development, and this is regular interaction with our most serious mental health consumers in the community. We have an officer that's assigned with mental health specialists to do assessment and outreach for these clients that they identify. It ensures that mental health clients make court appearances and attend mental health services appointments. And again, this is for our most serious consumers of mental health resources, the ones that really need our help the most, that have been identified. So another area that we're working on now is called trauma-informed policing. The department is implementing this informed policing training. As a matter of fact, our in-service just started, and this is what we're doing right now. We're also going to be training our recruits in it as well. Trauma-informed policing is a style of policing where officers are educated on trauma and the impact it has on people, so that it helps us minimize the infliction of or exposure to any unnecessary trauma. It also provides support and services, obtains greater cooperation from victims and witnesses, and provides a better experience with the criminal justice system. Basically, it's understanding that the majority of people that we deal with, when we go out and take a call, they've gone through some type of trauma. Something bad has happened. People usually don't call the police when they're having a good day and things are going well. So it's helping us to understand and communicate better. Just to give you one example, children in the home, oftentimes they may not be the actual victim of the crime that we're over there addressing, but we can't forget that they witnessed it and they're going through trauma and dealing with that. So teaching our officers how to address those needs as well, to also talk with those children and get down on their level, that's part of this. And then it's important to remember too that trauma doesn't just affect the individuals that we're going out to help, it affects our police officers, because they're seeing this day in and day out. So we have programs such as peer support, we have a chaplaincy program, we have a employee assistance program, and right now one of the major initiatives that I'm working on to improve is an early intervention program to help our officers deal with this trauma that they're dealing with on a regular basis. And it's not just addressing the very critical incidents such as officer-involved shootings and those things that we recognize quickly that's going to generate a lot of trauma. But it's the calls that they take over and over and over, and the pain and suffering that they see in people, and how we better equip them to deal with that. Handle with Care is a really good program that we've instituted recently along with the help of the Oklahoma City schools. But it's through a partnership with them, through an initiative called Handle with Care. When officers encounter a child that's been exposed to trauma of any kind, officers notify the child's school. This notification triggers the attention of school counselors who monitor the child and provide extra care. Quite simply, it's just an email address that our officers have a link to. They can get to it in their car, from their computers in their car. And if they go out and say they answer a call, and it may not be, again, something that happened to the child, maybe a family member was arrested or something bad happened in the home, they can email that Handle with Care, and they don't provide any information or details about it. They just say that this child needs to be handled with care. So when that child gets to school the next day, they can be dealt with in a much more appropriate manner and have counselors talk with them. It's been a very successful program. We've had, actually we've noticed our numbers have gone up. The officers are really starting to use this more. I've also been meeting with other members of the community and coordinators of leaders of state agencies to try and see if there's ways we can expand this, that when that email goes out, other people that may be able to get involved and provide services. So it's a really good way for us to reach out and help those kids that are involved in those situations. And again, that's part of procedural justice too. We've had quite a few changes in the number of people incarcerated on municipal charges. This is because of criminal justice reforms and other things that we've implemented. But keep in mind, this chart, it only reflects people that are incarcerated for municipal charges only. It doesn't include state charges or when someone's processed through the jail on state and city charges. It's only the ones that, that we control on the municipal charges. So fiscal year 16-17 was the first year we started tracking this statistic in LFR. Previously, we just tracked the number of arrestees processed. So that's why, you see how it's actually had a 52% drop. And I'll talk about a little bit of that. Some of that is attributed to the municipal warrants. No officers are no longer detaining or arresting or booking in someone on adjudicated warrants that are financial obligation only. Unless there's been an indigency hearing held. This was implemented in December of 2016. LFR more accurately tracks incarcerations too for municipal charges because it doesn't count the rebookings. And then defendants are brought in by marshals on warrants during business hours so that they can be brought in before a presiding judge, which may help reduce that jail time or keep them out. And then also the updated cite and release measures. We started that in October of 2018, and there's several, I won't list all of them that we do, but there's a lot of them that we can now cite and release on municipal charges only. Give you some examples: driving without a license, driving under suspension, first time offense. There's no need to take someone to jail on that. We can still get them off the road so that they're not a danger, and we don't have to put them in jail. We can write the citation and release them for that.
Chief, I just wanted to interrupt here and mention that this program, what's being accomplished here with criminal justice reform is really a reflection of many parties working together, the police department working with municipal courts, with Sean's leadership, with the municipal counselor's office, with Cindy, with Judge James. There's a lot of folks that are involved with this, and it really contributes, but really been a team effort, and I think it's something we're going to continue to see improvement. So I appreciate those efforts.
Absolutely, and as was mentioned in the slide earlier, it's a collaborative effort. It has to be. We can't do this by ourselves for sure, and there's been a lot of work in a lot of different areas of criminal justice that's really helped lead to this. So thank you for bringing that up. This is the number of inmate days utilized for municipal charges. This measure again tracks the total number of incarceration days for inmates with city charges or city warrants only. It does not include state charges or state warrants, and doesn't include a combination of state and city charges. So if we arrest somebody and they've got some state charges as well, their time is going to be a little bit longer until those state charges get resolved. These are just for the municipal charges only. November 2015, courts began allowing defendants arrested on a city arrest warrant to be released on their own recognizance. And then in 2016, officers ceased jailing persons like we talked about before for the EX warrants. And then also too, the 10-hour rule that individuals can be released with a maximum holding period of 10 hours for all municipal offenses with specific exceptions. Used to, this was 12 hours, and what that resulted in was a little bit longer because of the jail's processes in how they were released and where they were placed if they were in there longer than 10 hours. So that was part of that, and it's helped contribute to this drop too. And with that, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question related to that drop. So I assume that means that whether it's, I don't know what money that would have come out of, but I assume that for when we are jailing someone at the county jail, we pay the jail a certain number per day per person. Is that right? So essentially we've realized some cost savings because of some policy and procedure changes. Do we have a number that we know, or have we tracked that? And if so, is there a way to utilize those savings for maybe more, I don't know, like other programming or community outreach that would help kind of maybe even continue some of these efforts to kind of keep reducing those days? We
negotiate our jail contract every year with the county. And I'm glad you brought that up, because in 2015, that jail contract was $2,614,514. And the contract we just did this year was $1,108,720. So we've cut that down quite a bit. And it is based on the average prisoners per day, how long they're in there, and how many prisoners we have in there. But again, the contract is negotiated and then budgeted for that item as part of our budget. We don't, I mean, ultimately, those savings are there, but as far as, that's probably more of a finance question on where that money would go, because we only come in as this is how much we need for our budget to cover the jail contract.
Okay, I guess I'd be interested in maybe us looking into that and finding ways where I assume that when we look at the budget for the next year, maybe seeing what has that reduction been, and can we think creatively about, can those monies or the I know it's like a budget, it's not necessarily cash flow, but that in essentially we can maybe allocate more money towards like the FACT program or some of the other community outreach initiatives that promote public safety in sort of the neighborhood realm. I'd be just curious about us looking at that.
In 2017 and 2018, we were saving about $500,000 to $600,000 a year. And so with these numbers, we're at roughly $1.3 million that we're saving on the new jail contract. So that's very encouraging.
I had a couple questions. When it comes to the implicit bias training, how often does that occur for our officers? Is it just a one-time thing, or do we do that annually or biannually? How does that work?
All of the officers coming into the academy get it, so they get that training started off as a foundation. We just did this training. It was in 2016 and 2017, so it hasn't been very long ago yet. It's also incorporated in, just like, for example, scenario-based training, things that we do. It comes up quite often in that. It comes up in our traffic stops and things that we do, other things that we teach. It doesn't necessarily have to be that this is titled implicit bias training for the officers to see that that's part of what we're doing and what we're looking at. The really good thing about the training that we did in 16 and 17 was we had this group actually train our officers how to be trainers in this, so we can come up with our own programs and things that we do to make sure it's integrated. And that's the thing about training. If you don't integrate it into the things that you do as a regular part of your daily tasks, it doesn't become ingrained. So, sitting down and just saying this is implicit bias and here's, having a class directly related to that sometimes is not as beneficial as integrating it in other forms of the training that you do, whether it's scenario-based or anything like that. And so I feel like, we're doing those things. We're always looking to each year when we do in-service, looking at different types of training and classes that we'll do and trying to make sure that all of these things are incorporated in there as part of procedural justice.
My other question, when it comes to the crisis intervention trained officers, how many officers do we currently have employed?
Police officers were, about 1,080, 87? I think 1,087.
And when this training is done, we'll have 158 that are officially trained as crisis intervention trained officers?
That's correct. The national organization for CIT, that kind of, they're not a governing body by any means, but they recommend the best practices and how the program should be implemented. They recommend around 25%, 22 to 25% of your officers be trained in it. And the reason that is because we want officers that have a passion for that want to go out and do that. If I train everyone in it, just make it mandatory, you have to be trained as a CIT, they're probably not going to do, a lot of officers aren't going to do as good a job at that because they don't have that passion for it. So that's what they want as those highly specialized CIT officers. And again, don't forget, all of our officers receive mental health training, and we do mental health training every year.
So Chief, just to clarify that it's a difference between, so every officer in different parts of our training receives crisis intervention training. It's just the ones that, the number you're talking about are those that are certified as for the crisis intervention team.
It's a specialty. Give you an example. It's like a negotiator, for the tactical team. That's a specialty, someone that is trained in that. We don't have everybody trained as a negotiator. We have a small group that is. And the thing about that too is when I was over I was a negotiator myself, and when I was over that unit, I made sure that all of our negotiators receive training as a CIT because most of the time they're dealing with individuals that are in crisis. So CIT is a specialty like anything else, like the tactical team or, a field training officer or anything like that. You only want certain individuals that are very dedicated and very committed to that. You want them trained in that so that you have that specialty. And the goal is to have those officers at every division spread out, to where at any given time there should be a CIT officer available to come and assist on some of these calls.
So basically, but the numbers you expressed, we're still not at least 25%?
We should be pretty close to there. We should be around 22% once we get these 8. What I'm looking at doing is we're in such a flux right now. We're trying to hire so many people. It's putting on these schools is it's not difficult, but it takes a lot of resources to do. So the closer we get to our max of the 1283 that we're now authorized for, then we'll look at expanding that more too and putting on more classes and having more CITs. Because right now it's just a moving target because we average about 41 people leaving each year, and I'm trying to hire to keep up with that and running these academies. And you got to understand too, that number that I'm giving you includes a group of 56 that just graduated the academy. They're not fully out there as officers yet too. So when we scheduled this class in September, we didn't have that group too. So we're still, those numbers are always kind of in flux.
But Chief, is the goal to get to the 25%?
Absolutely.
At that 25%, so you still want to be working to get there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's just, again, it's always a moving target.
And where are we when it comes to our hot team? Are we going to increase that number?
Right now, at each division, they're running between 17 and 19 shortage. So they have that many vacancies at each division. So there's a lot of things I want to do once we do get to our 1283, and it includes expansion of the homeless outreach team. What I envision and what I'd like to do with that is have enough homeless outreach team to kind of address each division, each area of the city. And right now, I've got 2 guys basically covering the whole city. We've done some training with them to train our patrol officers, and they understand the contacts and the resources that the homeless outreach team has. They've shown them a lot of the apps and the things that they use for those resources. So we're trying to help our patrol officers as much as they can, kind of be an extension of them. But again, I don't want to pull anybody else off the streets right now answering calls until I can get a little more people out there. But I do have plans to expand the homeless outreach team.
Chief, on that note, what should residents do whenever I got a call late last night from someone in Military Park who right across the street from them, there's a house where homeless folk are setting up shop. I guess originally a resident let a single person do it, and now when she's not there, it's being kind of overrun. And I walked them through the task force that we have and what MAPS 4 is going to do, and we talked about housing first, but I suggested they reach out to the HOT team. But what is that process like, and what can residents expect whenever they reach out?
Actually, the best way to initiate that, and people always kind of have an aversion to it because they think it's just for emergencies, but it's how we dispatch all of our officers. If they'll just call in on 911, and we need to get that documented, we need to get some officers out there so they can assess that and see what the situation is, see if there's any violations of law or city codes or anything like that, so we can start getting other people involved in that. But it starts initially. They've got to make that 911 call and make us aware of it. A lot of times, people in the community and in the neighborhoods, they know way more about what's going on there than we do because they're there all the time. So making us aware of that, that's what starts that process. And usually what will happen is when they create that initial call, an officer will come out, they'll assess it. It may be late at night. There may not be a lot of resources and things available that they can do. There may not be anything criminal going on. And what they'll do is they'll relay that through their chain of command to where it gets over to the homeless outreach team or someone that can get more involved. They may get the action center involved in it. And so it's kind of how they start that process. I would tell that citizen just to call into 911, let us come out, let us assess it, let us document what's going on.
Thank you.
Chief, I'd just like to say thank you for the job that you're doing. Congratulations again on your promotion.
Thank you, sir.
But also for your officers and your civilian staff. I'm very proud of the force that we have. I think you guys do a great job. And I think it's endearing that you guys are continuing to strive to improve. So thanks.
I won't argue with you. I think we have the best people in the nation, and I told Mr. Freeman that I wouldn't take this job anywhere else but here. We got the best city and the best people on our police department. I agree.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
So there's 4 other reports that are on. We don't have any other presentations. We have the donations year-end summary report, the annual report on the buildings that have been removed from the abandoned buildings list, and then the annual report on the community CAP program. Staff would be happy to answer any questions that you all have on those. We also have the claims and payroll, and all those reports are available online.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 13, citizens to be heard. We have Ronnie Kirk.
My name is Ronnie Kirk from Ward 7. My address is 2328 North Missouri. Ms. Nikki Niece, I was so proud and honored to have another person so committed to Ward 7. Thank you. This city council, the one that's assembled today, is one of the best city councils that we had, and this is the best team in all these years we've had together. I come down to speak on OG&E. They've been trying to figure out what the people stealing all this copper wire. If they would put a disruptor up in those lights where when a wire is cut, it'll set an alarm off. You don't have to put them in all the lights, but in some of them, and it'll set off an alarm, and that'll help take care of some of this here. Another thing I like to say is all the kids. You know, I've been feeding kids since 1990, 11,000 kids. And so when we were small, all we had to worry about was Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent fires. Then it went to duck and cover for the nuclear attack. So the kids nowadays, they see on the news every day, shootings and killing, kids killing parents, kids coming in there shooting up the school, adults coming in there shooting up the school. This is implanted in their minds. And for this, we're not gonna have enough sociologists to help these kids out. This is implanted. This is what they're seeing every day. It's implanted in their mind. It's killing them. That's all in these games that they play. Death is real. It's not a game, but the kids are seeing this. I talked to some of the parents because I've been feeding some of these kids now that they're grown and have kids. I said, what do y'all kids talk to y'all about today? Well, we had to learn how to run and hide and duck behind stuff and try to get in a room. This is all these kids are learning today. So we need to reach out and before this gun laws be passed, we'll just reach out as one, as a group, and say we need to think this over. We're not going to have enough mental psychologists for these kids. It's going to be implanted in their mind. It's there every day. And that's what I came down to talk to the city, because y'all represent us. Y'all represent the whole city. Let the other states, y'all got first-hand knowledge, because I come down fighting for these kids every day. So we need to all get together, at least think about it. We're not going to have enough mental psychologists for these kids. We just not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. Michael Washington.
Washington. 2900 northeast with a 18 in front. First of all, a gallant presentation by the chief back here. However, I think he's missing a great important point here that Michael Washington intended to share with y'all today. He doesn't tell y'all, for the most part, and probably, let's give him an inch or two of not possibly knowing that this is going on, but every time there's a traffic stop, Miss Councilwoman Nice, your district, Ward 7, district number 9, every time there's a traffic stop or pulling over some person for a light tail out or whatever, there are always a gung-ho of 3 cars of police riding down on one person, ma'am. Did you not know that was going on? Oh, did you really now? What is the need of that, ma'am? That's gung-ho gangerism. Huh? Are you kidding me? And, we're addressing, I'm just letting you know that I see it now. This is the whole point. Thank you. Thank you now. Now, I'll be coming to your office a little bit more and telling you about things that need to be corrected. Now, not only that, but has the chief also informed you that a citizen riding a bicycle, having no problem with anyone, not being disruptive, he was being pulled over and told to stand in handcuffs while he talks to him? Has he told you about that? Watch out now, Michael Washington's the real community servant and activist who's going to bring it to you like it needs to be heard, not like it was, but like it is. And we're going to straighten this thing out. Now, I heard about these people getting ready to hold a press conference. Y'all need to come on out there and watch me have some fun here on this facility. You understand me? I'm not going to let anybody, any councilwoman, I'm not going to let anybody in this horseshoe here, I'm not going to let anybody in this private sector determine what Michael Washington can and cannot do or will do in the Western Hemisphere of what we call the United Snakes of America. That's what I called it, the United Snakes of America, and I will not bow down. I'm a revolutionary to the hardcore and will die coming there. I don't fear man, woman, child, or horse. But what I do fear is the ultimate God that created us all. Let me say this, Ward 76, Joe Beth Hammond, you represent closely what Ed Shadid did when he was here. The question that you ask is very valid, very straight to the point, and very effective. And I, for one, for the most part, must give credit what credit is due because I was trained that way. Train up a child in the way it should go and not depart from you. And it is why I've taken a survey in closing. I've taken a survey from the citizens of Ward 7, and I asked them, what if y'all thought about me running for city council? I got an avalanche of support. And this is what I'm thinking about doing, because we need to bring back economic stability among the little people back to the northeast side of Oklahoma City. And I'm sure that we'll be able to get along, council members. Why? Because more than likely I'm going to be doing a lot of filibustering around here. Thank y'all very much for your time and patience. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the citizens who signed up to be heard. We have 2 items that we previously voted to go into executive session regarding, and so we will handle that and then return after that is complete.